Welcome to HOTSPOT Update, your go-to source for quick and accurate updates on the world's hottest current events. If you're looking for a clear and objective perspective, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic.
The White House on Tuesday, August 12th, stated that the summit in Alaska on Friday between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is a listening exercise for the president, thereby tempering expectations for a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire agreement in the short term. According to White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt, Trump will meet privately with Putin during the talks in Anchorage, Alaska. In the future, he may also visit Russia.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good to see all of you here again today. On Friday morning, President Trump will travel across the country to Anchorage, Alaska, for a bilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The brutal war between Russia and Ukraine broke out under Joe Biden's incompetent leadership, but President Trump is determined to try and end this war and stop the killing. This meeting came about because the president of Russia asked the president of the United States to meet through his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who, as you all know, traveled to Russia to have a conversation with Putin at his request. And so the president is agreeing to this meeting at the request of President Putin. And the goal of this meeting for the president is to walk away with a better understanding of how we can end this war. And the president said at this podium yesterday when he joined all of you in the room that he hopes in the future there can be a trilateral meeting with these three leaders to finally bring this conflict to an end. But this administration has really used every lever, has taken every measure to achieve peace through a diplomatic solution. And I think the president of the United States getting in the room with the president of Russia, sitting face to face rather than speaking over the telephone, will give this president the best indication of how to end this war and where this is headed.
Thanks so much, Caroline. We are learning that President Trump spoke with Ukrainian President Zelensky. I was curious if you can share any more details about their call, and did Zelensky give President Trump any red lines, any non-starters ahead of this summit on Friday?
Look, I don't want to reveal the private conversations between the president and President Zelensky, but what I can tell you is that the president has deep respect for all parties that are involved in this conflict and are trying to bring this conflict to an end. After Special Envoy Witkoff returned from his meeting with President Putin in Russia, his first phone call was to President Trump. And President Trump's first phone call was to President Zelensky and to our friends in Europe to keep everybody in the loop about where the United States can see moving the ball forward to end this conflict. And so we continue to be very much engaged with President Zelensky and the Ukrainians, but also our allies in Europe as well.
And then just one more for you. How does the president measure success coming out of this meeting? The president at times has suggested that Putin might be tapping him along. Is he prepared to walk out of this meeting if he senses that Putin is not serious about ending this war?
I think I just answered that question for you and what the goal and the expectation of the meeting is. And I won't jump ahead of any hypotheticals, and I'll leave it to the president to speak to all of you after the meeting, which I'm very confident he will.
Are you optimistic that a deal will emerge from this meeting, or is he simply going to listen?
I think this is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end. There were many sites discussed, but of course Alaska is a state within the United States of America, so the president is very honored and looks forward to hosting President Putin on American soil.
Last thing, is there a joint news conference plan, or will the president have a solo one? What sort of scheduling stuff?
Yeah, the mechanics and the scheduling, Steve, are still being ironed out. For Friday, we're working with our Russian counterparts to put those plans into action, and of course we'll keep you all apprised on the logistical details of Friday as soon as we get them. Charlie?
The president said at the podium yesterday twice that he was planning to go to Russia. Was that a verbal slip-up, or does he actually plan to go to Russia?
Perhaps there are plans in the future to travel to Russia, and on Friday the president will be meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, as you know. Look, right now the President of the United States has done more to end this war than his predecessor, Joe Biden, who allowed this war to take place. This war, don't forget, happened at the result of the weakness and the incompetence of the previous administration. And so the president inherited this conflict, and he is determined to end it. And it's a very complex and complicated situation. As for the details of the plans that have been kind of tossed back and forth, I won't get into those, and I will let the President of the United States discuss those plans with the President of Russia, with our European allies, and the President of Ukraine, Zelensky himself as well.
Is it a plan to meet with Putin one-on-one?
Yes, that's part of the plan. And as for the other mechanics and logistics, I will let our team speak to that when they're ironed out.
A researcher at the Ukraine Forum of Chatham House told Reuters ahead of the Alaska summit that Ukraine will not accept any agreement imposed without its involvement in the negotiations between the two leaders, Trump and Putin.
What's important to stress ahead of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska is that currently it seems that Ukraine will not be invited, but a key message coming out both of the Ukrainian capital and European capital is that there can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. So whatever might come out of that summit between the US and the Russian presidents, those will not be terms that can be simply imposed on Ukraine. This is one of the key objectives of the Kremlin ahead of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, is also putting forward proposals that are unacceptable for Ukraine in order to present Ukraine as an uncooperative and ungrateful actor to Trump's peace brokering efforts. And in turn, that could also create and drive a wedge between the US and the European allies that have consistently emphasized the importance of maintaining Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Upcoming meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska is incredibly important for all parties involved. For Putin, because it allows him to project again Russia's international status after years of international isolation, particularly from Western countries. It allows itself to present Russia as a negotiator in good faith, which it's not. It allows Trump to add credibility to his self-appointed image as an effective peace power broker after repeated failures to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. And for Ukraine, it's important because, of course, it creates an opportunity to emphasize the need for ending the war. European leaders are currently trying to strike a tricky balance between trying to keep the US on board because they are still dependent on US military assistance to some degree. They are only now gradually trying to bolster their defense capabilities and acquiring more independence from the US security umbrella. But on the other hand, indeed, they understand that they might have that there will be tensions between the US position and European leaders' position on what a durable ceasefire and acceptable terms for ending the war in Ukraine might be. So that is the tricky balance that European leaders are currently trying to navigate, and Ukraine is fully aware of this. Zelensky's position in terms of ending the war in Ukraine are constrained both by the Ukrainian constitution, as he's publicly stated repeatedly, and also by Ukrainian public opinion. So according to the Ukrainian constitution, any changes to Ukrainian territories have to go through a national referendum that must be authorized by the Ukrainian parliament. In principle, the Ukrainian constitution can be changed. However, this is not possible for as long as martial law is in place. And if a ceasefire that is durable and credible were to be reached, then Ukraine could be lifting martial law. However, Russia is not currently interested in ending hostilities anytime soon.
Meanwhile, European Union member states assert that the Ukrainian people must have the right to determine their own future.
We had a statement by the EU 26 leaders this morning and, of course, by the President. Right now, we are focusing on the preparation of this meeting. We will have calls tomorrow among leaders. The position is clear. We welcome the efforts by President Trump to reach peace for Ukraine, a peace that is just and lasting and respects sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in this sense, we are working with Ukraine to make sure that this is kept in mind in the meeting of Friday. Anything else is pure speculations at this stage.
There is no doubt that it is in Poland's interest for Russia not to emerge victorious from this confrontation and to keep, I hope effectively, persuading President Trump to adopt this European position. That is to say, Ukraine cannot lose this war, and no one has the right to put pressure on Ukraine when it comes to territorial concessions or other decisions that would smell of capitulation. And I say this not only because solidarity with an attacked, neighboring, friendly nation demands it, but above all because it is a requirement of our own security. A weakened Ukraine, treated unjustly, and a strong, victorious Russia are a direct and immediate threat to Poland.
Recently, Trump has taken a tougher stance toward Moscow, agreeing to send more American weapons to Ukraine and threatening heavy trade tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil, an ultimatum that has now expired. However, ahead of his meeting with Putin, Trump spoke about the idea of land swapping to reach a peace agreement, which has deeply concerned Kiev and European governments. Some analysts argue that the prospect of Trump hosting Putin on U.S. soil at the first U.S.-Russia summit since 2021 has raised fears that he may prioritize narrow American interests over the security of European allies or broader geopolitical considerations.
Our personal discussion, which I think begins now, and then we're going to meet our whole team